So I wanted to just come on here and give you some insight into my understanding of eschatology. And I think the best way to do that is not to look to Paul's writings or the book of Revelation or some sort of contested passage. I think the clearest passage to give us an understanding of certain things, well, really what they are and what they aren't, the first half of Matthew 24. Because we have such clear language here, clear description of what's being talked about, and it becomes so clear what's not being talked about given what is said by Jesus in this passage. So we need to go back to the end of chapter 23, I think, to get the full context. Now, there's a great large number of things Jesus says in chapter 23 about the Pharisees and their hypocrisy and all these things. So Matthew chapter 23, verse 34, I'm reading from the King James this morning. Wherefore, behold, I send unto you prophets and wise men and scribes, and some of them ye shall kill and crucify, and some of them shall ye scourge in your synagogues and persecute them from city to city, that upon you may come the righteous blood shed upon the earth, from the blood of righteous Abel unto the blood of Zacharias, son of Barachias, whom ye slew between the temple and the altar. Verily I say unto you, all these things shall come upon this generation. O Jerusalem, Jerusalem, thou that killest the prophets, and stonest them which are sent unto thee, how often would I have gathered thy children together, even as a hen gathereth her chicken under her wings, and ye would not. Behold, your house is left unto you desolate. For I say unto you, ye shall not see me henceforth, till ye shall say, Blessed is he that cometh in the name of the Lord. This is going to be a verse-by-verse analysis. There's a lot of rich things we can get into here. But the idea here is that within a generation, Jerusalem would be destroyed, their house would be left desolate. And if you disagree with that, then that'd be a wider conversation. But chapter 24 picks up again. There is a break here, but as far as Jesus going out and what happens in the conversation. But what's just been said ties in thematically with what follows. Chapter 24 begins, And Jesus went out and departed from the temple, and his disciples came to him to show him the buildings of the temple. And Jesus said unto them, See ye not all these things? Verily I say unto you, there shall not be left here one stone upon another that shall not be thrown down. So he goes out to the temple, he looks at the temple, he says, these stones are going to be thrown down. And this is, some people call it the second temple, let's call it that. Zerubbabel's temple, Herod's temple, because he embellished it, whatever. But we know what we're talking about. We're talking about the temple that was destroyed 40 years later. And that's when what Jesus said, came to pass. Now, verse 3, we continue on. As he sat upon the Mount of Olives, the disciples came to him privately, saying, Tell us, when shall these things be? Now, these things is clearly reference to what he just said. Otherwise, this question doesn't mean anything. What shall be the sign of thy coming and at the end of the world? So, are these three distinct questions? Yes. In their mind, are they speaking about the same thing? Perhaps. But they're asking about the destruction of the temple that he just spoke about. They're asking about his coming, and they're asking about the end of the world or end of the age. Verse 4. And Jesus answered and said unto them, Take heed that no man deceive you, for many shall come in my name, saying, I am Christ, and shall deceive many. And ye shall hear wars and rumors of wars. See that ye be not troubled, for all these things must come to pass, but the end is not yet. For nation shall rise against nation, and kingdom against kingdom, and there shall be famines and pestilences and earthquakes in divers places. All these are the beginning of sorrows. Then they shall deliver you to be afflicted, and shall kill you, and ye shall be hated of all nations for my name's sake. And then shall many be offended, and shall betray one another, and shall hate one another. And many false prophets shall rise, and shall deceive many. And because iniquity shall abound, the love of many shall wax cold. But he that endures unto the end, the same shall be saved. Let's just stop there for a moment. A lot of things to look at. The big question is, are these things looking forward to the destruction of the temple or some other question? And we can say that there are false Christs today. Sure. There have been throughout history. Sure. There were in the first century. Sure. We can talk about persecution throughout, either in the first century, throughout history, or today. Sure, to some extent. So, what is it about these things that would? How can we pinpoint what Jesus is addressing? Is he addressing again that generation leading up to the destruction of the temple? Is he talking about something else toward the end? So, what would make what he's talked about so far? What would make that distinct and only applicable to one situation or the other, or a future situation? And I think the key is verse 6 and 7, because wars and rumors of wars, has it ever been the case that has not been? Have there been wars going on and rumors of wars going on since Jesus spoke this? Is there ever been a time in our own lives that we don't hear about nations rising up or rumors or things of that nature? Now, the only time that wasn't, and maybe with some idea, the only time that wasn't the case is during this time, because the Romans had a secured peace. They had conquered, much of the known world. There were not wars and rumors of wars going on. No one would dare to test Rome at this time. The next time that Rome would come into conflict with anyone or anything would be the insurrection leading to the destruction of Jerusalem. So, and you can look to famines, pestilences, and earthquakes, and all these other signs and say, well, that's happened throughout history. That happened at this time. That's probably going to happen in some greater scale later on. That's the argument. But the idea of wars and rumors of wars only really makes sense in the first century context. And I've talked to dispensationalists who say, well, yeah, the very first part is talking about leading up to the destruction of the temple. And at some point they break away and say, well, the rest is talking about the future. But it seems to indicate that this is all talking about the first question: when was the temple going to be destroyed? Well, think about all these things. Think about the persecution you're going to face, the betrayal you're going to face, the false Christ rising up, and all these things. Earthquakes, pestilences, rumors of wars. We can see all these things take place in the first century leading up to the destruction of Jerusalem. So moving on to verse 14. And this gospel of the kingdom shall be preached in all the world for a witness unto all nations, and then the end shall come. And again, this is the end of the temple, the end of something else, the end of the world. Paul himself says that the gospel was preached in all the world, that their faith was known throughout the whole world. Just as all the world should be taxed at the beginning of Matthew, meaning the Roman Empire, this gospel would be spread throughout all the Roman Empire. There's no reason to assume this is a literal entire world future event, especially given biblical language. Verse 15. When you therefore shall see the abomination of desolation spoken of by the prophet Daniel stand in the holy place, whoso readeth, let him understand. There could be some confusion about this. As far as if it's the exact sign that Daniel spoke about, or if it's something similar. Now, did Daniel speak about a pig being sacrificed on the altar by Antiochus Epiphanes in his day? Does this speak of the Gentile armies coming in Jerusalem? And again, I'm not going to be able to make my case just from that verse, but the idea, I think, stands. Verse 16. Then let them who be in Judea flee into the mountains. And this is really key. This is really key to the whole, everything that's been said so far. Then let them which be in Judea flee into the mountains. Let him which is on the housetop not come down to take anything out of his house. Neither let him which is in the field return back to take his clothes. And woe to them that are with child, and to them that give suck in those days. But pray ye that your flight be not in the winter, neither on the Sabbath day. For then shall be a great tribulation, such as will not since the beginning of the world to this time, no, nor shall ever be. Except those days be shortened, there shall be no flesh saved. But for the elect's sake, those days shall be shortened. Then if any man shall say unto you, Lo, here is Christ, or there, believe it not. For there shall arise false Christs and false prophets, and shall show great signs and wonders, insomuch that, if it were possible, they shall deceive the very elect. Behold, I've told you before. Wherefore, if they shall say unto you, Behold, he is in the desert, do not go forth. Behold, he is in the secret chambers, believe it not. For as lightning cometh out of the east, and shineth even unto the west, so shall the coming of the Son of Man be. For wherever the carcass is, there the eagles will be gathered together. So if this is the rapture theology as is commonly taught, and you know that Christ is coming, it doesn't make any sense to talk about fleeing to the mountains or going out and hoping it's not in the winter or the Sabbath, or hoping that you're not pregnant. None of that makes any sense in application. Now, if you say, well, that's just the wicked when the tribulation comes. Well, if you believe this tribulation is worldwide, then fleeing isn't going to accomplish anything. Being pregnant or in the winter or on the Sabbath doesn't make a bit of difference. But again, if this is talking about the house being left desolate, if this is talking about the temple is going to be destroyed, not what stone will be left upon the other, when you see that that's going to happen, then it would make sense to flee to the mountains. It makes sense not to take time to grab your stuff and get out. It would make sense that those that are with child or pregnant or nursing will have a difficulty fleeing from that destruction. It would make sense that it would be difficult to travel in the Sabbath, on the winter. And during the Sabbath, the gates of the city were normally shut. That's why this application almost has to be the destruction of Jerusalem specifically. There'd be false Christs, there'd be false signs, there'd be people that'd be misled. Some people would be told to stay. If you take a close look at history, at one point during the siege, there were some that were claiming, they'd be delivered or things of that nature. So again, I don't want to get too deep into that or Josephus or history, but we see the parallels, and we see that this doesn't make sense to apply it to any other explanation of this passage. And ultimately, the carcass is following the eagles. Eagles, vultures. Some say the eagle is like the Roman symbol. Some say the translation should be vulture. The birds of prey that would follow the armies. Luke 21 is a bit more clear. Some even say Luke 21 is talking about the destruction of Jerusalem, but Matthew 24 is the end of the world. But I think you take both together, it's clear. The abomination of desolation is the army coming to destroy Jerusalem. Not one stone will be left upon the other as far as the temple is concerned. Verse 29. Immediately after the tribulation of those days shall the sun be darkened, the moon shall not give her light, and the stars shall fall from heaven, and the powers of heaven shall be shaken. Now, admittingly, this gets into some apocalyptic language. So the idea that the sun and moon would be darkened. But of course, we see this in Isaiah around chapters 12 or 13. We see this when Babylon is going to fall, that it's as if like the sun and moon that represents the authorities and powers are going to be cast down. So we have apocalyptic language looking forward to destruction of a kingdom. We could say that that's the case here, looking at Jerusalem. Just the powers will be shaken. Verse 30. Then shall appear the sign of the Son of Man in heaven, and then shall all the tribes of the earth mourn, and they shall see the Son of Man coming in the clouds of heaven with power and great glory. And again, could the clouds here just mean destruction? Again, is this apocalyptic language? Is this highly symbolic imagery? Speaking about the same thing? Now, some people might say that he's already shifted to some other topic. Some might argue he goes back and forth. Not really for me to say, but a great deal of what we've read already is definitely being applied to AD 70, just 40 years, the destruction of Jerusalem. Verse 31, and he shall send his angels with a great sound of a trumpet, and they shall gather together his elect from the four winds, from one end of heaven to the other. I take that just to mean the gospel call in spiritual language. A lot more I could say about that, but there's some controversy there. Verse 32, now learn a parable of the fig tree. When his branch is yet tender and putteth forth leaves, you know that summer is nigh. So likewise ye, when ye shall see all these things, know that it is near, even at the doors. Verily I say unto you, this generation shall not pass till all these things be fulfilled. There's a tension in the New Testament when Jesus talks about signs, and Jesus talks about his coming as a thief in the night, that no one knows the day or hour. So the tension can be easily relieved if you see the fig tree, you see the signs, and that's a parable pointing to the destruction of Jerusalem rather than Christ's second coming, the end of the age. And verse 34 is the verse that transfixed my understanding completely, because he says this generation will not pass till these things be fulfilled, just like he said at the end of chapter 23. All these things are going to come upon this generation. Your house will be left desolate. If we understand generation as anything other than 40 years, a generation dying in the wilderness, then this passage just doesn't make sense. This is a passage that many atheists and skeptics use against the Bible being inspired. They say, well, Jesus promised to return within 40 years. He said there'd be some here that not taste death till they see the kingdom. And I believe the kingdom is the church. I think we could weigh that out. We can talk about that. The Mark 9 passage, that's the traditional understanding. The church is the kingdom. The traditional understanding is that, this is talking about the destruction of Jerusalem, and it happened in one generation, and a fulfilled prophecy is so much stronger than anything else. Now, there's a big debate about the rest of the chapter. Is the rest of the chapter also speaking about the destruction of Jerusalem, or is that when he answers the final day? And I'd be open to have a conversation with someone who sees it differently. But up to verse 34 of chapter 24, I believe that's definitely speaking of the destruction of Jerusalem, even the apocalyptic language right before the fig tree parable. But then he says, verse 35, heaven and earth shall pass away, but my words shall not pass away. But of that day and hour knoweth no man, not the angels of heaven, but my Father only. So I do believe there is a change of topic, and this is when it happens. So I do believe everything, verse 34 and prior, is discussing the destruction of Jerusalem, is warning them when these things start to occur, when you see these things happening, be sure not to be caught up in it. And it's difficult for me to see anything else in that passage. As someone who was raised in a tradition that held to the pre-trib rapture very firmly and would explain this passage very differently, so that I don't understand the arguments or things of that nature. I just don't think you can go through verse by verse and explain it in such a way. Again, I'm open to challenge or open to discussion. And if you understand this, if you understand, there's some other points to make about John 5 and Jesus' return in 1 Thessalonians 4. And I'm not saying I even have a firm grasp on what the book of Revelation is even discussing. But Matthew 24 is so clear, and this passage and a lot of the ideas that we see in the Gospels people use to defend a pre-trib rapture or some other sort of end times thing. This doesn't really touch on the idea of the Antichrist or the man of sin or a lot of other related details, but it's ripping it out of context, I think, to take the beginning of Matthew 24 and apply it to the end of the world, when verse 34 is so clear that this generation that Jesus was speaking to at this time, not when Matthew wrote it, but when Jesus is speaking it prior to his crucifixion, the very week he was crucified. This generation won't pass away till these things take place. And the message is, your house is, as far as everything's concerned, already left to you desolate for those who reject Christ. And it's interesting to see that history seems to indicate there were no Christians that were there in Jerusalem when it was destroyed. There was even a time when the Roman army surrounded Jerusalem and went back, and some people were able to leave, but some of them stayed. So even if someone was caught up in that prior to the actual attack, it was meant to be a siege at first, and it turned into, well, let's just go in and destroy everything. There's even a time if someone was in the city when the army surrounded Jerusalem that they were able to escape. And there's a whole lot of, again, there's a lot of historical texts that talk about these things. And we didn't even talk about like the signs in heaven and whether that occurred when Jerusalem was being destroyed. And some people doubt whether that's the case or not. But there's definitely some clear passages of scripture that indicate that Jesus was speaking about the same event from the beginning of the chapter up until verse 34. And then the question is, does he change topics from then on? I believe he does. That'd be a good conversation for a different day for someone, even a member of the Church of Christ, who disagrees with me on that. So I want to keep this brief, and I want to keep this straight and to the point. So much of the language just doesn't make sense outside of a destruction of Jerusalem context. I've got some other plans for some other content, so keep up, and I'll try to give some more attention to my YouTube channel, ongoing Bible studies, and other discussions and topics. If you have any counterpoint or any discussion you want to have about this, I'm open to have those dialogues. I'm always ready and willing to be challenged. So for now, everyone have a good day. God bless. Thanks for watching.